welcome back to Secondhand Scott, where I pretend I'm just casually into watches while actively ruining my YouTube algorithm and possibly my financial future. And today we're talking about the IWC Mark XX. But before we get there, I have to explain how this whole thing started. It started on a cruise. I was dressed up for my daughter's birthday, feeling good, looking somewhat respectable, and waiting for my family to finish getting ready, which, as every dad knows, means I had anywhere between 5 minutes and the rest of my natural life. So I decided to kill some time and walk into the watch store. Now, I have always loved watches. I've always noticed them. I've always thought they were cool. And I had always wanted a Breitling. But I also liked things like paying bills, eating food, and not financially drop kicking myself for fun. At first, I was actually looking at a green dial Citizen GMT, nice watch, safe watch, responsible adult watch. Then the manager came over and basically said, "Hey, you want to ruin your life a little bit?" He pointed me toward a Breitling Superocean that was discounted and discontinued. I put it on, and that was it. Game over. I fell in love with it. And then my wife saw it, and somehow she fell in love with it too, and which is dangerous because once your wife co-signs a bad financial decision, it no longer feels like a bad financial decision. It feels like destiny. So we haggled a little, got them down to what felt like a good deal, and boom, I bought my first serious watch. And little did I know I had just opened the portal. I went on that cruise as a normal guy who liked watches. I left that cruise as a full blown watch addict with a YouTube search history that looked like a cry for help. I was literally in paradise, surrounded by ocean views, good food, and family memories. And there I was, glued to my phone, watching Teddy Baldassarre and Nico Leonard rank watch brands like it was breaking news. Suddenly, I was hearing about brands I had barely paid attention to before: Grand Seiko, JLC, Zenith, Tudor, IWC. And after that cruise, I went all the way down the rabbit hole. I started learning about movements, finishing, history, case sizes, wrist presence, bracelets, straps, resale, brand reputation, and all the little things normal people do not care about because they are emotionally healthy. Then I went down the Grand Seiko rabbit hole: Zaratsu polishing, spring drive, dial textures, case finishing, all of it. And the more I learned, the more I started figuring out what I actually liked, not just what looked cool at first glance. But one brand I still did not really pay much attention to was IWC. I knew IWC was respected. I knew watch people talked about them. I knew they had history. But honestly, at first, I did not get it. A lot of their watches looked simple, almost too simple. They did not have the flash of Breitling, the dial insanity of Grand Seiko, or the instant look at me energy that grabs you when you're new to watches. IWC felt like the grown up in the room. And when you are early in the watch addiction, sometimes you do not want the grown up in the room. You want the shiny thing yelling from across the case. Then Father's Day happened. And because I am apparently a great husband and father, I celebrated Father's Day by dragging my family to Cherry Creek Mall so I could look at watches. Very normal, very balanced, definitely not concerning behavior. The funny thing is, I did not even know they had an IWC and Panerai boutique there. I knew IWC existed, but it was one of those brands I had mostly seen online and kind of passed over. It had been sitting there in the background of my watch journey, but I had not really paid much attention to it yet. But for some reason, that day, I was excited to check it out. My wife could immediately tell something was happening. She basically looked at me like, "What the hell is IWC, and why did your eyes just light up?" And honestly, fair question, because I did not even fully know why I was excited. It was like a moth to a flame, except instead of a flame, it was a glass display case full of financially irresponsible decisions. At this point, I had already been watching all the YouTube videos. I was learning the brands, learning the history, and learning what watch people argue about for absolutely no reason. And IWC was one of those brands I knew I was probably supposed to respect, but I still did not really understand it. Then I saw the Mark XX, and this is where IWC finally started to make sense to me. Because the Mark XX is not just another clean, simple watch. It is the latest chapter in a line that goes all the way back to the original Mark XI from 1948, a watch built for the British Royal Air Force. That watch was designed to be precise, legible, and reliable above everything else. No nonsense. No decoration for the sake of decoration. Just a tool that had to work. Over the decades, IWC kept refining that idea through the Mark series: the Mark 12, the Mark 15, the Mark 16, the Mark 18, and now the Mark 20. Each version stayed close to the same core philosophy: clarity, durability, and purpose. They adjusted the proportions, they changed the movements, they refined the details, but they never really lost the identity. And the Mark XX is basically the modern expression of that entire history. Because online, the Mark XX can almost look too simple. It is one of those watches where if you are brand new to this sickness, you might scroll right past it. No crazy bezel, no skeleton dial, no "look at me, I make terrible decisions" energy. It is just clean, almost suspiciously clean. But in person, that simplicity hits completely different. The first thing that got me was the dial. Everything is exactly where it should be. The numerals are big and clear. The minute track is clean. The hands are sharp. And the triangle at 12 o'clock gives it that classic pilot watch look without trying too hard. There is no clutter. There is no drama. There is no random paragraph of text on the dial telling you the watch is automatic, professional, extreme, limited, certified, master, ultra, mega, super, whatever. It just tells the time. And somehow that makes it cooler. That is what I started to understand about the Mark XX. It is not trying to impress you in the obvious way. It is not the guy at the party yelling about his car. It is the guy who quietly owns the building. The case is 40 millimeters, which for me feels like the sweet spot for an everyday watch. Big enough to have presence, but not so big that it looks like I strapped a kitchen appliance to my wrist. And that matters because I like watches with some wrist presence. I do not need everything to be tiny and vintage, but I also do not want the watch wearing me. The Mark XX felt balanced. That is the word I keep coming back to. Balanced. The dial is balanced. The case is balanced. The whole design feels like someone actually sat down and said, "What does this watch need?" and then stopped before ruining it. And that is harder than it sounds. A lot of watches try to add personality by adding more stuff, more colors, more text, more complications, more polish, more everything. The Mark XX does the opposite. It has restraint. And restraint is one of those things I did not fully appreciate when I first started getting into watches. Early on, I wanted the shiny thing, the loud thing, the watch that immediately grabs your attention from across the room. But the more I looked at the Mark XX, the more I realized this watch was doing something different. It was not trying to win me over in 5 seconds. It was trying to be the watch I would still love 5 years from now. Then you get into the specs and it becomes even easier to understand. Inside is IWC's 32111 automatic movement with a 5-day power reserve. 5 days. That means you can take it off, wear another watch, spiral into 3 more YouTube reviews, question your entire collection, come back later, and the Mark XX is still running like nothing happened. That is the kind of practical feature I love. And it also has 100 meters of water resistance, which makes it feel like a true everyday watch. I am not saying I would buy a Mark XX to go scuba diving or wrestle an alligator, but I do like knowing it is not some fragile little dress watch that panics if you wash your hands aggressively. Then there is the strap system. IWC has the EasX-CHANGE system, which lets you swap straps without tools. And normally I would hear that and think, yeah, cool, marketing words. No, but with the Mark XX, it actually matters because this watch changes personality depending on what you put it on. On leather, it feels clean and classic. And on bracelet, it turns into this sharp, everyday sports watch. On rubber or textile, it leans back into that pilot tool watch vibe. That is when I really started to see the beauty of it. The Mark XX is not beautiful because it is flashy. It is beautiful because it is useful. It is beautiful because it is legible, balanced, practical, and connected to real pilot watch history. It feels like a watch designed by adults for adults, which is annoying because apparently I am becoming one of those. And then there's the green dial. That one threw me off a little bit because when I think of the Mark XX, I think clean, classic pilot watch, very serious, very, I read manuals for fun. Then you see that green dial, and suddenly the watch has a little attitude. It is still very much a Mark XX. It is still clean, legible, balanced, and restrained. But the green gives it just enough personality to make you look twice. And that is what makes it interesting. A lot of green watches feel like they are trying way too hard. Like the brand saw green was popular and said, quick, make everything forest colored. But on the Mark XX, the green works because the rest of the watch is so disciplined. The dial layout is still simple, the case is still clean, the hands and numerals are still doing their job, so the color does not feel like a gimmick. It feels like the serious guy finally ordered a fun drink. For me, I still think the white or silver dial might be the one I would personally go for because it has that crisp, everyday look that works with almost everything. But that green dial is dangerous. It is the one that makes you say, I just want to try it on, which, as every watch addict knows, is one of the dumbest lies we tell ourselves because I just want to try it on is usually step one of a financial crime scene. And that is probably why the Mark XX hit me so hard. After the Superocean pulled me into watches, and after Grand Seiko showed me how deep finishing and design could go, the IWC Mark XX showed me something else. It showed me that a watch does not have to scream to be special. It does not have to be the loudest thing in the case. It does not have to be covered in polish, color, complications, or hype. Sometimes the quiet one is the one that gets you. And that is exactly what happened to me. I walked into that boutique thinking IWC might not really be my thing. I walked out thinking about the Mark XX way more than I expected. And that is usually how you know a watch got you. The Mark XX may look simple, but simple is not the same as boring. Sometimes simple is what makes a watch beautiful. So that is why I love the IWC Mark XX. It has the history, it has the specs, it has the everyday wearability, and somehow, even with all that restraint, it still has personality. Would I go white dial or green dial? Honestly, that is the problem. The white dial feels like the smart choice. The green dial feels like trouble. and unfortunately, trouble looks pretty good on wrist. Thanks for watching. Secondhand Scott, please like and subscribe to my channel. It would mean the world to me. Let me know what you think. Is the IWC Mark XX boring, or is it secretly one of the best everyday watches out there?